Thank you, Nahla, for
one more thing. I was responsible to make your menu a bit more colorful and especially greener. But I got stuck for 40 minutes on the highway for a major bad accident, and I forgot. So please excuse me. No vegetables for today.
Thank you, Nahla, for the generous introduction, and thank you, colleagues, for coming. This is really wonderful opportunity to perhaps share with some of my colleagues some of the themes that have been mentioned in the chapter book that Professor Leisler insisted that I should contribute, even though it was not the first item that I offer for this book project. But his wisdom actually paid off for my research, because I think the direction that he wanted me to make the contribution proven to be correct and productive for me. So today, what I will like to do in this presentation is to weave a number of themes together that do not seem at the beginning the same, but you will see at the end they make sense. So what I will do is I will, actually I'm trying to see how I go about the PowerPoints. Okay, next, I'm trying to figure, here, don't worry, like next one. So I'm just gonna outline, I won't make a PowerPoint presentation. I will use some images to capture a moment or shift within my analysis, but I do feel it was important to give you at least the summary of the moves that I will make in this presentation and the final point I try to draw from these moves. So to begin with, I briefly state what is vitiligo and what's albinism. Number two, then I situate a history of vitiligo and albinism within the context of the anti-miscegenation policies in the antebellum United States. Those who do not know what antebellum is, because it's possible some people might not know, there is a term used in the critical race theory about United States racial discourse and racial practices, postbellum and antebellum. Antebellum is often considered during the slave period and before the Civil War. And postbellum is considered event that took place after the Civil War, including short period of Reconstruction, Jim Crow laws, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is kind of a historical marker. And after that, then I will address a fictionalized whiteness in terms of racial purity recently come to the fore in a massive but poorly understood way. Here I am talking about media controversies surrounding around the racial passing for Black of Rachel Dolezal. Some of you might not actually know about it, but the woman was really on all over the US media for at least 2 weeks until Russians invaded Syria. Then that just took the headline. But otherwise, pretty much she took over the entire headlines for 2 weeks. So something bigger had to happen for her to, to lose out the headline to Russian invasion of. But what was actually fascinating for me to address her is people were not addressing what Dolezal herself was doing. Dolezal had some kind of secretarial level job with NCAAP. She is a mother of a Black child. She was married to a Black man, and as we can see, also she insists of being Black, and this is very, very important. And one distinction that Dolezal makes, and this will become very clear in the presentation, is she says, "I'm not an African American, I am Black." And there is a very significant distinction between these two categories, and we can see in the presentation. So I begin with the first part of the presentation, and that is, first and foremost, the vitiligo and albinism have absolutely nothing to do with race. This phenomenon happens to anybody, regardless of ethnicity and race. Vitiligo is different from albinism in that in vitiligo, the skin loses its pigmentation in an uneven ways. And the depigmentation process could be caused by various factors, including stress, hormonal imbalances, exposure to strong chemicals, and also it could have a genetic causes. On the other hand, albinism is a complete lack of any pigment on the skin. In other words, a person with albinism has no pigment. Here I'm talking about any form of pigment on their skin. And So these are usually lumped together, but they are two different causes. So this is really how much I want to say about vitiligo and albinism. I did a little bit more research, but I felt I want to stay from the scientific aspect of it. But you can really see from the image I use that the origins or the genetic component, and also its capacity for reproducibility was very important for American in the age of the anti-miscegenation laws and in the age of what you call the antebellum anti-miscegenation policies. So albinism and vitiligo pigment disorders could happen to any person, regardless of race and ethnicity. However, when this phenomenon appeared among enslaved populations in the United States, vitiligo and albinism came to be framed in the dominant popular culture, medical journals, and media discourses as anomalous sites of illegitimate and, in some cases, threatening whiteness. As a potential sites in which whiteness can be reproduced and transmitted, albinism and vitiligo became threatening sites in which the fiction of genealogical reproducibility of racial purity of whiteness can be undermined. Albinism and vitiligo came to be implicated, however, in the broader anxieties around the fear of interracial miscegenation and spread of uncontrollable whiteness. In 1622, the first anti-miscegenation statutes were passed in the colony of Virginia. In spite of existence of anti-miscegenation statutes, interracial mixing between the enslaved African population and the members of the white settler classes became widespread. Anxiety around uncontrollable interracial mixing was considered most threatening when it involved black men and the white women. Attempts to regulate intimacy between African slave population and the members of the white settler classes were complicated by gender and class dynamics. In addition, the one drop of black blood, and here is where you see that Rachel Daleshell is making her claim to blackness. The one drop of black blood anti-miscegenation statute meant that physically white subjects, if they have any hint of African ancestry, could be categorized as a slave property. However, anti-miscegenation statutes can control neither the spread of whiteness within those who are considered legally black by those statutes, nor can they stop white-looking people passing for white. Furthermore, spread of whiteness through the interracial reproduction became unmentionable taboo because the primary source of this interracial wayward reproduction, and the term wayward is a very, very important term I take from this book, Eilis Weinbaum, Wayward Reproductions, Genealogies of Race Nation in the Transatlantic Modern Thought. It's a very good book, and I have drawn from this book extensively. I just want to mention how much I really owe to her work. Well, members of the white male slave-owning classes and their slave black women. Quote, central question, and here I'm quoting from this very interesting book called The Color Complex. This also really is a book that shows the much broader but hidden also color dynamics within the African American community. So here I'm quoting from Russell and Mitchley and Ronald's The Color Complex. Quote, the central question of colonial lawmakers to settle was whether mixed breed offspring should have the free status of the white father or the slave status of the black mother. Virginia legislators found a solution that worked to their advantage. Departing from the traditional English law in which the status of the child was always determined by that of the father, the colonialists voted in 1662 that children in Virginia should have the status of the mother. However, the matriarchal anti-miscegenation law intended not only to safeguard the racial purity of whiteness, but primarily to control the offspring of interracial reproduction. Often, anti-miscegenation laws allowed the white slave master to own their own children as slave properties. It was under this complex dynamics that albinism and vitiligo emerged in the late 17th century as site of discourse formation and were deployed to control the spread of whiteness within the slave population. It was no accident that the attempt to collapse in the racial miscegenation with albinism and vitiligo emerged in Virginia. Discourses around the problem of albinism became a convenient way to relocate the discourse of interracial miscegenation away from interracial race, interracial sexual reproduction, and to the realm of medical pathology. Of course, claims that albinism and vitiligo alone were responsible for the spread of whiteness within the slave population were not credible. First, because these pigmentation disorders occur in all ethnic and racial groupings. Also because they are limited phenomena. Nevertheless, vitiligo and albinism came to be framed almost exclusively as signs of defective, anomalous whiteness on the black skin. This strategy was meant to tacitly explain away the taboo subject of interracial miscegenation. However, reducing the proliferation of whiteness within and across the racial color line to albinism and vitiligo presented unexpected new challenges. For example, if as colonialist leaders and racial scientists claimed vitiligo and albinism were the sole causes of spread of degenerate and form of whiteness, how then to explain the presence of large population of healthy and white-looking population within the enslaved people within the enslaved population? Despite this contradiction, slave-owning colonialists such as Thomas Jefferson sought to relocate the site of wayward interracial reproduction between white masters and their black female slaves to the domain of medical discourses on vitiligo and albinism. Thomas Jefferson was one of the first early theorists who put forward a speculative theory about the causes of what Martin called the emergency of the white Negro. Jefferson's primary focus was to show that whiteness of the African slave cannot be sexually reproduced since it's a sign of disease and degeneracy. Quote, and here I'm quoting from this very, very neat book called The White African American Body. In order to mitigate this threat to the order of nature and society, Jefferson attempted to stabilize the revolutionary potential of the white Negro body by effacing the distinction between it and the body of the albino and reinforcing the difference between African and Anglo-Saxon skin. He describes the color of the albino as pallid, cadaverous white, untinged with red, reducing the albino through this description beyond the position of analyzable living object of natural history to that of dissectable corpse, apparently devoid of the warming and to a small extent humanizing blood that marked whiteness of skin. End of quote. The medicalization of interracial reproduction of whiteness was designed to remove moral responsibility from the white masters. They were also designed to calm anxieties of the white settler population, who feared if whiteness continued to spread within the slave population, eventually it would lead to the dissolution of the borders between the races, and with it, the very enterprise of slavery and racial order of the color line. Quote, and this I'm quoting again from Martin. In spite of his effort to limit the effects, Jefferson's literary exhibition of the white Negroes spurred further display and discussions of the encroachment of white skin on the black body. The image of African American deprived of blackness, slaves transforming, degenerating, possibly regenerating, fired political imagination and insinuates its way into the debate on race and disconcerting indication of the fiction of whiteness, Martin. On the other hand, members of the anti-slavery movement suggested that if the blackness of this slave could be dissolved, it will also dissolve the very foundation of racial order of the color line. The final result could lead to the end of slavery. In order to suppress its revolutionary potential, therefore, Jefferson proposed a more drastic measures in order to prove supposedly innate and immutable inferiority of the white African American body. Surgical dissection was one of the means used to prove the white Negro whiteness was defective and that this type of whiteness cannot be reproduced by means of sexual reproduction. Quote, dissatisfied that African skin will not yield the knowledge he thought Jefferson understands the next logical step, intrusive step, to delve beneath the surface, to apply scalpel to the skin, to remove it, to unveil the secret of racial differences he hopes to uncover. The proof of inferiority that Jefferson believes dwells beneath the skin requires submission to the anatomical knife, to optical glasses, to analysis by fire or by solvent to delineate the difference. End of quote, Martin. Jefferson's radical approach to the threatening presence of white African-American body was to cut it up, fragment it, burn it by fire, dissolve it through solvent, and place it under the scrutiny of the scientific optical glasses, to subject it to the sharp knife of the anatomist. All of these drastic measures were mobilized to counter the revolutionary potential of the white African-American body. In addition, the systemic deployment of language of scientific precision sought to give moral legitimacy to the discourse of scientific racism and to the social and political order of the colored line. However, the more Jefferson and other racialists tried to explain away the presence of whiteness within the African slave population, the more difficult it gets to contain it, to isolate it, and to destroy the threatening whiteness of the African-American body. Quote, faced with the possible erasure that the figure of the white Negro presents, the natural philosophers and medical practitioners of the early republic sought to define more physiological markers, variations, and bring hidden sources of difference to the surface. Intrusive experimentations toward the end of 18th century into the 19th century began to replace observation at a distance. So you can really see the movement from kind of ethnographic you might call anthropological observation to more kind of biopolitics of dissection and kind of scientific precision, scientific positivism. The failure to contain the African slave with the white skin indicates the extent to which violence could be unleashed to contain, isolate, and ultimately eradicate white African-American body. This history haunts the most recent political, and here is where I move to Rachel Delachelle, because what most people who actually paid attention to Delachelle missed is her insistence that she is not, that she is not African-American, that she is black. And what Delachelle insisted that she is black, she is referring to 400 years of American history. She said, I didn't say I was an African-American, I said I was black. And this is really, really very important. And there was actually a little clip I was trying to show you when an NBC interviewer keep on badgering her, are you African-American, are you African-American, are you African-American? And I don't know, I know it was one of those films like, I don't understand the question, but actually she said, is your father white? And she said, I already told you about my father. And she said, are you an African-American? She said, I said I was black. And I think this exchange is very, very, very telling. The gap between being an African-American and being black are two different things, and they have two different histories. And I was actually quite surprised also that people who make their living in critical race theory didn't bother to actually enter this game. So, maybe I should stay with, you'll see what this means, the magic cheese in my latest move. So maybe I should return to Rachel Delachelle in this move. So one more time. So let's keep her in our face. So what happened is that just to really maybe verbally address for those of you who are not following Rachel Delachelle's case, is Rachel Delachelle is apparently, according to her, she's a black woman. She went to black college. She has white-looking, and I like the word white-looking parents. She has a black-looking son. She was married to a black-looking husband, and she decided to be black. And somewhere along the line, someone decided that she needed to be outed. And she was outed. She lost her job. And She was like really the biggest scandal that happened to the United States for almost 2 weeks. I counted at least the New York Times devoted for over 30 articles to Rachel Dolezal. And it was quite interesting to see what kind of cardinal sin has this woman committed. And what fascinated me was not only the kind of amount of attention attracted to secretarial position, women who really didn't go all the way to the White House by enlisting, the one-drop law, because I think this is also what got Obama to the White House. But people were deliberately doing the kind of an element of obfuscation and avoiding the kind of her actually argument that I am black by insisting that her person, that she is fraud, that she is liar, that she is this, that she is that. And nobody really gave her any chance about what do you mean by being black? Because in all the interviews that I have seen, nobody asked her, what do you mean by being black? Because asking her what does it mean by being black, then she would get the opportunity to explain. But in fact, if you can see, she hints on more than hints, she offers more than a hint that in fact that her parents cannot prove that she is not black. And I think that's the key. Her parents cannot prove that she is not black. And she does more than that. In fact, what she does is she also has a problem with her parents and has now she adopted an African American as a kind of surrogate father. So this brings us to a situation again of this messy history of race and reproduction bind, or if you want, a race and reproduction mismatch. And I think what a couple of from one opinion piece, New York Times suggested that tried to establish the fact that Rachel Dolezal was white. So among the things they suggest is when she was younger, she was blonde and had blue eye, and what we call a blonde hair and a fair skin. And then they brought in the testimony of her mother and father, who said she has no known black ancestry. But the story gets very complicated because Rachel Dolezal has black child, married to a black man, and the parents have also 4 adopted black children. So clearly, and she has kind of surrogate black father. So clearly, it's a very messy situation, but it is how real life is. What fascinated me is the attempt by the media to insist that Rachel Dolezal is white, where Rachel Dolezal herself is insisting that I am black. And what I think is she's hinting on is the ideas I mentioned before for 2 reasons. One is she cannot reproduce her whiteness by the one-drop statute, and this stands now, because explicitly all the media suggests that she fathered a black child. So clearly there is a hint that she will not be able to reproduce her whiteness. She can only reproduce blackness. And for this reason, one of the outcomes of or implications of the anti-miscegenation law were the white women automatically could not reproduce their whiteness. Because remember, in this 1662 statutes, the child takes the status of the mother. And if the mother, therefore, is rendered black, then she cannot give her status to her son. I think I actually thought about this law when I thought about Barack Obama, because his father was an African foreign student. He was not an American citizen. His mother was categorically white, but she gave her son a citizenship, but not white, black. So again, this is like the same formula as Rachel Dolezal. By law, by the one-drop law, the child could only be black. And in fact, this even happened because Hawaii in 1960 was not one of the American states that had actually still anti-miscegenation laws on the books. And in fact, if he was born in Kansas, where his mother was from, in 1960, I believe, I can double check, but from the literature I've read, still they had the anti-miscegenation laws on the books. And it would be interesting to know how that would have turned up, instead of Hawaii. So what does this tell us? There is a history to this, at least at the level of the literature and the level of the discussion, this sort of what Weinbaum calls race and reproduction bind becomes undone. And one way in which I want to show this in the literature, as I said, in the antebellum literature, is an old novel by a woman called Kate Chopin. And the novel is called Desiree's Baby. It's a very interesting novel. It's like obscure, but some people actually study this. I draw upon Alice Weinbaum's excellent analysis of this novel because it reveals how the fabricated genealogy of purity, of whiteness, in Desiree's Baby, the central protagonist of the novel ultimately fails to reproduce itself when, despite her white appearance, she gave birth to a black-looking baby. The ironic twist to this fictional story is that it's not clear who is the source of the blackness in Desiree's Baby, she or her white-looking husband, Armand. However, Armand quickly blames Desiree for being the source of the blackness in their child and immediately casts her out and baby. In addition, he burned all the Desiree's belongings. One of the items he found in her drawers was a fragment of a letter written by Armand's black slave mother. Quote, "This letter written in Armand's mother's hand, thanks the good God for having so arranged life that her dear Armand will never know that his dear mother, who adores him, belongs to the race that is cursed with the brand of slavery." But of course, Armand did not save the letter. He burned the letter with the remaining of Desiree's belonging. By casting out Desiree and her black-looking baby, and by burning the fragment of the letter written by his own black slave mother, Armand was able to construct his own identity as a white man. This story is instructive because it shows the identities are not only social and historical, but that they are also the product of power struggles. So by preambling this aspect of my presentation, then I'm going to turn now to the trick that you've been given, the white African body. So you might say, well, what this has to do with the white African body? So now I think I will be able to introduce Western fascination with the white African body. And when I mean about fascination, I'm talking about media representations. People with African models with vitiligo and albinism are now sought after in the fashion runways, when actually black models are getting not very good response. So the question is, why the fascination with the albinos? I mean, is this a matter of humanity? I mean, what's going on here? So just gonna, these are things I will show you later, but okay, here is a good example of media representation of the threat the albinos face. Even though the numbers are, somewhat small, the media coverage around this issue is very, very big, and almost everybody knows about it. So there is a resurgence in the Western fascination with the African body drained of any trace of melanin. There is also equal Western fascination with the gradual whitening of the African body with vitiligo. Some of the leading Western media outlets, such as The Guardian, New York Times, and others, publish lurid stories about cases involving cannibalism of African witches, involving African witches whose primary prey are people with albinism and vitiligo. According to one such report, Tanzania people with albinism are being kidnapped and murdered, and their body parts sold into the black market because of the belief that people with albinism and vitiligo have magical powers, which are transferred to those who consume them. The idea that a white body has a magical power was first promulgated during the colonial era. According to Dyer, here I'm talking about Richard Dyer's work, like White and other work, in the age of Western colonialism, claims that the white European body has special and unique powers and possessed enterprise were not uncommon. Yes, I'm okay. Okay, so I'm getting there. So the most important thing is that there is a belief that whiteness cannot be contained within the body. There is this element, this extra whiteness. What's also very important is that there is also money involved in this. I don't know if I show it here, but evidence shows that up to like a whole body of one of these people can fetch as much as $75,000 US. We're talking about little part, you can buy it for $600 US in Tanzania, and the corpus fetches as much as $75,000, which means capturing and killing these people is not just about killing them for superstitiously, but there is also a money component to this. And I want to stress the aspect of the money component by showing you 3 interesting cases recently that happened in the media, and showed you that there isn't something to the rumors that the white skin has a magical power. One of the story I want to show you is called the magic cheese scam. How many of you heard about this magic cheese scam? This is a story about this woman from France who actually went to Chile and scammed thousands and thousands of dollars from peasant local people. She told them that she gave them a little kit how do you make this magic cheese, and apparently people have to invest up to 400 euros to do this, and apparently the idea is she will be able to sell this magic cheese to L'Oreal, and that L'Oreal will use it to produce a very powerful skin whitening products. And in order to show that, in fact, that this is the case, she used, this as you can see, Mrs. Gilbert allegedly, defrauded thousands of people. You can see up to how many people in this, one of the largest pyramid scheme in Latin America. What is important is that she uses images like Michael Jackson in her ads, that she said, look, these are the product that Michael Jackson used. And this is a quote from Guardian article describing that now she's serving a 3 years sentence. But you can see really the product actually makes skin whitening is one of the selling points to this. And what I find actually very interesting is even though the consumers of this product and the producers are in Chile and the L'Oreal is in France, the go-between will be in Brazzaville. So really there is a kind of element of kind of another golden triangle to, you can say another white triangle, to this enterprise. And I find it really fascinating that this was actually also being used. But you see, this is one of L'Oreal's big story. L'Oreal makes millions, billions and billions of dollars selling whiteness to women around the world. So the fact, this is L'Oreal. Lancome is owned by L'Oreal. Lancome is owned by L'Oreal, yes. Lancome is owned by L'Oreal. Vichy is owned by L'Oreal. Maybelline is owned by L'Oreal. Biotherm is owned by L'Oreal. L'Oreal owns everything. All the things you don't think. Body Shop is owned by L'Oreal. Pharmaceutical companies like Sanofi is owned by L'Oreal. Okay, L'Oreal owns about 20% of Nestle, if not more. L'Oreal has its tentacles everywhere. So you can you can really see that the selling this magic to L'Oreal as the key company there's some kind of sellability of this idea. Yeah. So in other words, you can actually defraud people by telling them you can make millions of dollars by selling whiteness. This is another interesting line. Almost every African woman right now, like this craze in Africa, actually, I think it was you who told me that an uncle has to say, I cannot give you a ride because I have to pick up Phineas de Mello for his wife. This is like African phenomenon. This is produced in Nigeria. You can find it in Ottawa. Thousands upon thousands of African women bleach their skin by using Venice de Mello. Venice de Mello is both cheap, deadly, and massively available to African women, and it's produced in Nigeria. So clearly, whiteness is being promoted in all sorts of ways, by eating it, by rubbing on the skin, by corporations, by biotechnology. And this is not to lessen the fact that is, a phenomena of Africans eating their own, people, because there is a rumor mill about, there's a magic to vitiligo. But I want to caution that this is not just kind of an outlier. There are other rumors that are equally deadly, like the magic cheese, like what's going on. So in the last 20 years or 20 or so years, there has been also phenomenal expansion, global wide, like in a global scale, of marketing all things to whiten your skin. Cocoa you can eat, cocoa butter you can rub on, yogurt you can eat. Like there is this kind of a massive globalization. And what I also question is why there is almost no critical analysis and intervention in this kind of global diffusion of whiteness and like this obsessive view of the African people with vitiligo and albinism. So therefore, I want to make it explicitly clear, I am not here to at all lessen how important it is to end this horrible practice. What I'm cautioning about, and I want to think about, is both it is historical framing as a kind of a threat to racial whiteness in the age of anti-miscegenation, but most of all, if you look at today how people with vitiligo and albinism are discussed, this prior history is almost missing. And it's discussed as some sort of African primitivism. So therefore, for me, is that also a way of historical recollection and situating the African albino through the kind of globalization of whiteness that goes that's 400 years of globalizing whiteness. And I think I would like to stop here because that's what Nahla told me, don't talk too much, yes, and open the floor for discussion because there's more to discuss, but I want to end earlier so we can have a good conversation and ask if you would like to ask me questions. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Absolutely, the imperialism and racist construction to it. Actually, there was an image I had, and unfortunately, I kind of forgot to add it in the last end. Is that there isn't actually an image in front of on the cover of Time magazine in the day in the issue. I remember it was on March 24, the day 2003 when the United States invaded Iraq. On Time magazine, and there's an image of Saddam Hussein full of bullets, but this is not it. There is actually a white brush being painted on his face, and it says, "Remaking Iraq," which means like a Iraq tabula rasa, but it's not being painted in brown, it is being painted in white. So clearly, depoliticization of globalization of whiteness is a part of depoliticization of political struggles. It's a turning identity into identity politics. It's about turning into global structures of racism into fashion. It's that kind of depoliticization of power relations. And absolutely, you are absolutely correct. I find it, I actually was aware about all this and I discussed in many, in my discussions. But keep in mind, almost often, I meet scholarly people who, when I present this work, they always bring tanning. So you clearly see the kind of like a repeated way of diffusing globalization and colonial nostalgia. Like for instance, now you can see commonly blackfacing of models from all over the world. Beyonce have done the blackfacing. It's done in Asia. White models are doing it. Everybody's doing it. And it's almost like blackfacing doesn't matter anymore. It's that kind of depoliticization of shrugging it off, as though like, move on. But you can really see when someone like Rachel Delachelle emerges, and she problematized racial purity of whiteness, despite all the discussions about hybridity and all mixing, entire US establishment descend on it, and those who make their living in critical race theory stay quiet. And that is also part of this new depoliticized space in which we discuss critical discourses. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I'm really happy I'm here. I really enjoyed a lot of what you said because for me, I'm struggling with all of it because even in schools, it feels like black people have never had any grounding since the inception of slavery. I see it every day I didn't realize skin whitening was so out there and for as long as it has been. And I think you're right, identity. And I think what I struggle with is certain words we use, globalization, and for instance that, and coming back to the identity, it's almost like we've been stripped once, stripped twice, stripped again. And yet, as much as I learn in this university, I've yet to hear anything that we have done good. So based on that, I'm angry and I'm hurt because me as a black woman, what I learned, not because I didn't think of questions, it was because we were never given anything. So right now I'm learning my history on Facebook. What I did, I gave my son the lies. And I think that's where we also continue to do their work to hurt ourselves. And I keep us inferior. And I think that bothers me beyond. So to look at my skin and want to lighten it, I might have wanted to do that when I was a child.
Yes.
Because I did know better. But I think what bothers me, their behaviors are never either questioned or challenged. And
Well,
when I do
yes,
that,
yeah.
even now in school,
Yes.
I'm looked upon as I'm a troublemaker by the whites and by the blacks. June, stay quiet. I can't.
Good. To make things easier for you, I was born and raised in Africa, and now I also set up a Facebook. My nieces and nephews, they look like 20 shades lighter than I am. So something must have happened in Somalia because none of my own relatives look like me. And it's like, so there's something going on that's like on the global scale. So this requires more research. Something is in the water. Yeah, so, yes, but thank you very much. Okay, yes.
Hi, thank you very much for that. Really fascinating. Question for clarification. I was trying to look it up on pigment and history. You were translating the history of albinism in terms of
Not the event itself, but the way it is linked to racialization.
I was wondering, not to foreground the medicalization of it, but I was wondering when did these terms actually come into being? When did professionals start using these medical terms to describe people who have these, like, loss of skin pigmentation?
Loss of skin pigmentation, but also that will be vitiligo. Not having a skin pigmentation, which is like, if you know about genes, there's something called sex-linked and autosomal. So it's an autosomal phenomena. Okay, so in other words, the person's melanocytes do not produce any melanin whatsoever. The phenomena is as old as humanity itself. Like if you want to look at one of the books that discuss about this, a book called Skin by a German woman called Claudia Bietin. It's just called Skin, and it's been translated into English. Those phenomena are there, but in medieval period, they were not concerned with anti-miscegenation laws. So they describe this kind of like maybe sin or something else or exotic or that sort of thing. So the phenomena themselves are not new. What's new is the way they come to be surrogate for a broader discourse of kind of discourse formation around the idea of racial purity. With something, by the way, even the European colonialists did not subscribe to. Because I can tell you, like among the European colonialists that are now of high powers are Europeans that have an partial African heritage. Here I'm talking about Thomas Mann having a Creole mother, Brazilian Creole. Creole is, so therefore that also shows that before Hitler, Germans didn't have to have racial purity, something Americans lie about. I can tell you someone like Alexander Pushkin, who has, African great-grandfather, Alexander Dumas. All these people are not called black. So the one-drop law and albinism are a particular historical formation that took place in the antebellum United States, where there was a statute law to regulate race within the context of slavery.
Is that when they actually adopted those terms?
No, the terms, how they come to be re-articulated.
Yes, okay. But I was actually wondering when the terms actually came to
The terms were not invented. I said in my expresses, the term were being re-articulated because they appeared in a particular enslaved population. So it's not like a phenomena that emerged never before. But this whiteness was separate from the whiteness of the interracial miscegenation that was quite widespread. So how do you explain all this kaleidoscope of different grades of whiteness, like first generation, second generation, among the enslaved population, which is the source of actually the interracial reproduction? Therefore, discourse of this kind of degenerate whiteness became a way to give an acceptable venue to discuss the whitening among the enslaved population. But the people with albino and vitiligo, if you're going to, you can look at like European classics. It's all there, yes. But they're discussed in a different ways. Yes, please.
Actually, in the Old Testament, the Book of April.
Yes. Like the birthmark, yes. It's discussed as a kind of like a kind of curse. Yeah. Yes, absolutely, yes. Yes, absolutely, yes, yes. Yes. But I'm talking about it is as, but they were not interested in dissections and, racial reproductions, and they didn't have like crazy people like Thomason, Jefferson, talking about, they didn't need all this. They had it, but they were not interested. Can it be reproduced? Because we're talking about now a scientific normative, scientific norms. Yes, Peter.
Yeah, no. Amidst all of this sort of geneticism of the one-drop law and all of that, I'm interested to hear your comments about like how that plays out versus something that I think is in play in some of what you presented here, which is can there be kinship relationships between people who are classified as black or white, right? Because it seems in the Rachel Dolezal case that's part of what's in play here, right? And
absolutely.
I'd be really interested to hear your
this is
how all these ideologies affect the ability to actually have like nurturing relationships.
Well, this is precisely the question, because this is exactly what Dolezal is trying to do. Is she's trying to reverse 400 years of denial. I mean, here I'm talking about people like Adrian Piper. We don't expose our own. Remember, passing for black, passing for white. Because 400 years, like I tell you one thing I done as a kind of like my own informal, kind of survey. And I can actually show you. Talk to Canadian. I'm talking about explicitly white Canadian. I will even see white Anglo-Saxon Canadian. Well, say, who are you? Oh, I'm a bit of this, I'm a bit of that. Like this is a normative. Okay, so the white Canadians will immediately tell you, I'm a bit of Cherokee, a bit of Irish, maybe a bit of Scottish. So already there is this kind of assertion that I am a product of miscegenation. Now take the same kind of groups and go to the United States and talk to the same Anglo-looking, Anglo-white Americans. They will all tell you, they are the descendant of Charlemagne. This is really the kind of, literally, I have yet to come across, white American who would say, I have a bit of African, a bit of, So that is the kind of the mythology of the, a very interesting article Jack Heath calls The Mighty White of You. So there is this kind of even archaeological reconstruction. So America is caught in a time warp of really finding some kind of unbroken genealogy of whiteness. And this is what the whole anxiety is coming from. Yes, please.
And I definitely understand that, especially with kinship ties. I know in my family, like my great-grandfather was considered Ukrainian even though he was English Protestant. From the time where we lived, it was bad to marry a Ukrainian person.
Yes.
However, with the Rachel Dolezal case, I find it really interesting that you use her, and I understand the context of this, but I wonder, because a lot of people I found, and maybe this was just in my, talking to people that I knew, the backlash was because she was representing a particular cause of issues that didn't actually affect her within the United States with police brutality and things like that, things that she hadn't gone through. And it was more upset about the representation.
Do you mean like there are no white who suffer police brutality?
No, I just mean for that, when I spoke to people about it, the biggest thing was that they felt like she was misrepresenting. So do you think that that's
Do you know who fined the NCAAP? The children of the white slave owners. NCAAP is found by whites, okay, who were black according to the one-drop law, who had more wealth than blacks because, even though they couldn't be white. They had the highest education. So therefore, for people who got all their privileges by being white, to fire and condemn a secretarial level single mother because she's representing issues that is a part of the kind of American lie. It's a both cruel and a lie. And especially it's a cruel and a lie from the point of view of NCAAP. It's actually quite shocking.
Yeah, I was just asking if that's why
No.
there's such a backlash.
Do you think an entire nation that want to rule the entire globe could descend on some nobody single mother, to crucify if there was not a larger theme that she was carefully transgressing?
Yeah, I was just mainly asking if it was that representation that they wanted to give off as the reason.
And listen,
why.
she's a secretary. She's not Obama. Obama is the one who misrepresents this category 100%. Okay, Rachel Delash is some nobody secretary. She doesn't make executive decisions. Look at her title, like she's some secretarial.
But wouldn't that make her an easy target?
She makes easy target because she refused to accept the idea that she is fraud. That's why she insisted on her blackness, yes.
Okay, and I do understand what you're
thought
asking,
she was the
because
president.
I think for me, I heard that it was light-skinned that came around with the NAACP.
Yes.
I read in my book, it was Du Bois.
Have you looked how he looks like?
Who looked good?
Du Bois didn't find it. There were a whole bunch of them.
I'm just saying, yes, he was one of the
Just look at how he looks like.
No, Du Bois is a writer that I'm reading right now.
Have you looked at what he looks like?
What are you talking about?
He has a blue eyes and blonde hair.
No, Du Bois is an author. He is.
W.D. Du Bois, you're talking about.
Yes, yes.
W.D. Du Bois is as white as anybody else.
Okay, and that too. See, so from there, I as a black woman, I don't know that. And I think that's what I'm saying. When it comes to this woman, I was offended. Why was I offended? When I looked at her, I saw a woman, and yes, you're right, the media does play. But what I saw and what I felt is exactly what this young woman said. No part of you will understand the murders of our children on the streets. Wait.
Okay.
Just finish,
Okay.
please. Because exactly what you're saying is what I felt.
Okay.
How do I know? And the reason I think I struggle with her was that when you see me, you see black.
Okay.
When I see her, I didn't see black. And
Okay,
all
good. Can I
understand-
just stop you right there because I want other people to get in. Imagine she had her known drop of black blood. She was a great granddaughter of W.D. Du Bois. She had the blue eyes and blonde hair.
I think what I'm feeling is
Okay.
that it's
No, but could you please give me a chance? Let's say Rachel Delachelle had her known one drop of black blood. She could actually prove it, that she was the great-granddaughter of W.D. Du Bois, because he was white. Do you think, therefore, then she's legitimate? Because now she has her proof. She can show it. W.D. Du Bois is my great-grandfather. She works for the NCAAP. She got a flowing hair, better than what's her name, Beyonce. Okay, okay. Do you think then, therefore, the outcome would have been different? Because her problem is she can't show the drop.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that I think what I'm getting to is that we did not create this. When I think of her, I now know. So when I think of her, I put her with Lena Horne, who used the pass.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Look, no, listen. Who is more powerful than Obama or Rachel Delachelle?
Obama is not powerful. I heard you say that.
He's not powerful?
He is
Good.
not.
Well, we're going to discuss after the break then.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Okay, any other questions people have? Yes. Pushkin would have been fired. Actually, I was told that someone from Carleton University, when I told him that I was doing something about Pushkin, and I told him about the fact that he had a great-grandfather who was a black African slave, he said, I bet the Russians do not know. So that answered for me the entire question. But the idea that the fact power absolutely follows the color line does not really respond to the fact that the Harlem Renaissance were largely light-skinned, that the founders of NCAAP were light-skinned, and in fact that there was a famous confrontation between W.D. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey. In one time that W.D. Du Bois tells Marcus Garvey, you are fat, ugly, and black. And also, if you want to see the W.D. Du Bois' own focus on the accumulation of whiteness. Look at two terms he invented. Look at a collection of essays called the Racial Uplift, and the people he invited to contribute to that collection. Only one person in this group were black, a woman called Phyllis Whitley. The rest of those who felt they were worthy of contributing to this collection were called mulatto. And the idea of racial uplift for him was the accumulation of whiteness as a source of racial mobility. W.D. Du Bois very much believed the whiteness mobility and assimilation through the accumulation of whiteness. And its literature is well established. Du Bois represented the opposite. The work I'm telling you should guide you, not what I think. Please go and read it. Yes, read The Talented Tenth. Read this book. It's a very, very important book. It has been wonderful to me. If you think I'm not like here, because I want to be challenged.
No.
Okay,
What
but
I'm saying, I think the challenge for me is it should be all be taught. It's like
selective. But I'm trying my very best in this class to bring something out. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions?